Hello and welcome to the brewery, and I have a beer in my hand. And what I have here is an old ale with coffee that I made a few weeks ago. So while I sample this beer, I'm going to go back in time and work through the brew day and talk a bit about brewing with coffee. Hello and welcome back to the brewery. It's been a little while from a video since I've been away on holiday, but it's time for another brew day. So today I'm making an old ale I plan to add some coffee to and some bread. This is loosely based on the red wine barrel aged old ale that I'll probably talk about in another video that I've done several times. So today we'll mostly be talking about brewing with coffee. So I'll be covering the various ways you can add it to your beer before coming down to the mechanism I'm going to use. We'll also be looking briefly at the beer I'm making, but there's nothing too exciting about that, so we'll see where that goes. So I'll get back and talk to you later. The grain bill for this beer is fairly simple. 7.5 kilos of Maris Otter, half a kilo of crystal and 100 grams of roasted barley in a 20 litre batch. Hello and welcome back again. After a little bit of pump and leak related drama, I seem to be having a lot of that at the moment. The boil is on, just coming up to temperature, and I'll talk a little bit about the hops. So first things first, we have very simple hopping in this beer. We have some Magnum start to boil, and with 10 minutes to go, some East Kent Goldings, once again all pellets. And as you can see here, I've stuck the Brulosophy tablet in with the second batch just so I remember to use it. Okay, so as the boil is getting on, time to talk a little bit about how to put coffee in beer. Lots of people do lots of different mechanisms for getting coffee flavours into beer. Some of them you can just do with malts, but normally you actually use some coffee. Obviously coffee comes in different forms. You could try adding instant coffee. I think it'd be lunacy, but you could. You could get pre-ground coffee, which I have done before, and use that to add to beers, or you can get beans and crack or grind them yourself. Beans come in lots of different forms and flavours, so you can get some very high roast beans with almost burnt flavours, your sort of classic Starbucks coffee flavours, all the way down to some very low roast beans that have almost none of the burnt and flavours that people sometimes associate with coffee. And once you have your coffee and your beans, you need to work out how you're going to add it to beer. It seems the obvious thing to do would be to add it sometime in the boil, but usually this will extract some of the more herbal and vegetable flavours out of coffee. You can get some pepper, like red or green peppers mostly, flavours out of coffee when you heat it up. And when you boil it, you can get some astringency as well. So it's not a usual mechanism. Some people put it very late in the boil, and that often works quite well. So you get a little bit of boiling, but not as much. It works reasonably well. But the most common mechanisms are to add it during fermentation in some mechanism or other. So to add the coffee to your beer during fermentation, you've got a number of options. The first and most obvious one is to make some coffee. Usually you make some very strong coffee with a lot of coffee grounds in it. Just filter it all out and just pour that into your beer. That has the advantage that you can taste what the flavour is you're adding, but once again it's fairly strong flavours you'll get with that. Other mechanisms people use is to cold brew the coffee. So you basically make the coffee using cold or even iced water, leave it in something like a cafetiere overnight in the fridge, perhaps, or at least for a few hours, filter the grounds out and then pour that into the beer. That's another good mechanism. It gets you a more gentle coffee flavour. Other methods people use is to simply crack the beans and put them in like you would a dry hop into your secondary fermentation at various points. You could also do an alcohol extract of the coffee. That works, but it's quite hard work since coffee flavours are soluble in water as well as they are in alcohol. So what am I going to do? I think this time I'm going to add a very low roast coffee. I've got an example here. So this is a very low roast coffee, so almost no burnt flavours. I'm going to crack the beans, not fully grind them, just crack them up a bit, put them in a bag and then stick them into the fermenter. And then every few days I'll come back and taste the beer until I'm ready to lift the beans out, and when I've got enough coffee flavour. So we'll see how that goes, and I will see you later. The old ale has been in the fermenter for about a week now, so it's time to start thinking about the coffee. Now, I quite like my coffee, so I get mine from these guys at Has Been. They do quite a nice variety of single sort of source coffees. This one, you can see that my Spanish pronunciation is non-existent, so Finca la Soledad Bella Vistina, something like that. It's particularly interesting, so some nice sort of tart fruity flavours to it with a backing of some chocolate, which is quite nice, sort of dark chocolatey things. In fact, this is on the bag. I think I agree with the bag. So coffee processing involves getting a bean that surrounds your actual coffee bean. So there's a sort of fruit that surrounds that off the bit you want. So this, I believe, goes through some sort of soaking cold fermentation. It says on this. There's a whole load of processes you can use to get the fruit off the coffee. This is one of the more gentle ones. It's then quite lightly roasted, I believe, this one. And then what I've done is I've taken about 100 grams of that to start with, and I've lightly crushed it. So you can see these sort of different sizes of crush there. It's quite hard to get a consistent one. Whether a grain mill would work, that would be quite interesting. I don't own one, but that'll be something to try at another date. What I am going to do is, now about a week into fermentation, we've got down to close to final gravity, is I'm going to put those beans into my dry hopping tube thing and then drop them into the fermenter for a few days and keep tasting. I've got a base sample coming off. The beer at the moment is sort of quite highly fruity. Well, it tastes like a classic old ale really at the moment. So we'll see where that goes. I've not put the Brett in yet. I'm going to do that when I put it in the keg, just to keep all my fermenters with clean beer in them for the moment. It's a metal fermenter, so it shouldn't be a problem, but it's just a little bit safer. So now time to load up the coffee and keep tasting it every day. The beans were left in the coffee for just over 24 hours, after which distinct coffee flavour was present in the beer and they were removed. Well, I hope that was interesting. The finished beer here has some distinct coffee notes in the aroma, some gentle non-roasty ones, backed with the fruitiness of the old ale. It's still a little hazy, but we will see what happens with that. In the flavour, the coffee continues. It's still fairly gentle. I may dry bean with a little bit more coffee to add some more flavour later, but in general it's quite a pleasant beer with a gentle coffee note to it. So I hope the information on brewing with coffee was interesting, and I will see you in another video.